Book 5, Part 2 of Ovid's Metamorphoses. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David Goldfarb. Metamorphoses by Publius Ovidius Naso. Translated by Brooks Moore. Book 5, Part 2. First Ceres broke with crooked plough the glebe. First gave to earth its fruit and wholesome food. First gave the laws. All things of Ceres came. Of her I sing. And oh, that I could tell her worth in verse. In verse her worth is due. Because he dared to covet heavenly thrones, Typhoeus' giant limbs are weighed down beneath Sicilia's isle, vast in extent. How often thence he strains and strives to rise, but his right hand Pachynus holds, his legs are pressed by Lilybaeus, Aetna waits his head. Beneath that ponderous mass Typhoeus lies flat on his back, and spews the sands on high, and vomits flames from his ferocious mouth. He often strives to push the earth away, the cities and the mountains from his limbs, by which the lands are shaken. Even the king that rules the silent shades is made to quake, for fear the earth may open, and the ground, cleft in wide chasms, letting in the day, may terrify the trembling ghosts. Afraid of this disaster, that dark despot left his gloomy habitation, carried forth by soot-black horses, in his gloomy car. He circumspectly viewed Sicilia's vast foundations. Having well explored and proved no part was shattered, having laid aside his careful fears, he wandered in those parts. Him Venus Erycina in her mount thus witnessed, and embraced her winged son, and said, O Cupid, thou who art my son, my arms, my hand, my strength, take up those arms by which thou art victorious over all, and aim thy keenest arrow at the heart of that divinity whom fortune gave the last award what time the triple realm by lot was portioned out. The gods of heaven are overcome by thee, and Jupiter, and all the deities that swim the deep, and the great ruler of the water gods. Why then should Tartarus escape our sway, the third part of the universe at stake, by which thy mother's empire and thy own may be enlarged according to great need? How shameful is our present lot in heaven, the powers of love and I alike despised! For, mark how Pallas has renounced my sway, besides Diana, javelin hurler. So will Ceres' daughter choose virginity if we permit, that way her hopes incline. Do thou this goddess Proserpine unite in marriage to her uncle. Venus spoke. Cupid then loosed his quiver, and of all its many arrows by his mother's aid selected one, the keenest of them all, the least uncertain, surest from the string, and having fixed his knee against the bow, bent back the flexile horn. The flying shaft struck Pluto in the breast. There is a lake of greatest depth not far from Henna's walls, long since called Pergus, and the songs of swans that wake Caister rival not the notes of swans melodious on its gliding waves. A fringe of trees encircling as a wreath its compassed waters, with a leafy veil denies the heat of noon. Cool breezes blow beneath the boughs, the humid ground is sprent with purpling flowers, and spring eternal reigns. While Proserpine once dallied in that grove, plucking white lilies and sweet violets, and while she heaped her basket, while she filled her bosom, in a pretty zeal to strive beyond all others, she was seen, beloved, and carried off by Pluto, such the haste of sudden love. The goddess in great fear called on her mother and on all her friends, and in her frenzy, as her robe was rent, down from the upper edge, her gathered flowers fell from her loosened tunic. This mishap, so perfect was her childish innocence, increased her virgin grief. The ravisher urged on his chariot, and inspired his steeds, called each by name, and on their necks and manes shook the black rusted reins. They hastened through deep lakes, and through the pools of Paliki, which, boiling upward from the ruptured earth, smell of strong sulphur. And they bore him thence to where the sons of Bacchus, who had sailed from twin sea Corinth, long ago had built a city's walls between unequal ports. Midway between the streams of Chianae and Arethusa lies a moon-like pool of silvered narrow horns. There stood the nymph, revered above all others in that land, whose name was Chianae. From her that pond was always called. and as she stood concealed in middle waves that circled her white thighs, she recognized the god, and said, "Oh, thou shalt go no further, Pluto. Thou shalt not by force alone become the son-in-law of Ceres. It is better to beseech a mother's aid than drag her child away, and this sustains my word, if I may thus compare great things with small. Anapis loved me also, but he wooed and married me by kind endearments, not by fear, as thou hast terrified this girl." So did she speak, and stretching out her arms on either side, opposed his way. The son of Saturn blazed with uncontrolled rage, and urged his steeds, and hurled his royal sceptre in the pool. Cast with a mighty arm, it pierced the deeps. The smitten earth made way to Tartarus. It opened a wide basin, and received the plunging chariot in the midst. But now the mournful Chiane began to grieve, because from her against her fountain rites the goddess had been torn. The deepening wound still rankled in her breast, and she dissolved in many tears, and wasted in those waves which lately were submissive to her rule. So you could see her members waste away, her hones begin to bend, her nails get soft, her azure hair, her fingers, legs, and feet, and every slender part melt in the pool. So brief the time in which her tender limbs were changed to flowing waves, and after them her back and shoulders, and her sides and breasts dissolved and vanished into rivulets. And while she changed, the water slowly filled her faulty veins instead of living blood, and nothing that a hand could hold remained. Now it befell, when Proserpine was lost, her anxious mother sought through every land and every sea in vain. She rested not. Aurora, when she came with ruddy locks, might never know, nor even Hesperus, if she might deign to rest. She lit 2 pines from Aetna's flames, and held one in each hand, and restless bore them through the frosty glooms. And when serene the day had dimmed the stars, she sought her daughter by the rising sun, and when the sun declined she rested not. Wearied with labour, she began to thirst, for all this while no streams had cooled her lips, when, as by chance, a cottage thatched with straw gladdened her sight. Thither the goddess went, and after knocking at the humble door, waited until an ancient woman came, who, when she saw the goddess and had heard her plea for water, gave her a sweet drink but lately brewed of parched barley meal. And while the goddess quaffed this drink, a boy of bold and hard appearance stood before and laughed, and called her greedy. While he spoke, the angry goddess sprinkled him with meal, mixed with the liquid which had not been drunk. His face grew spotted where the mixture struck, and legs appeared where he had arms before, a tail was added to his changing trunk, and lest his former strength might cause great harm, all parts contracted till he measured less than common lizards. While the ancient dame wondered and wept and strove for one caress, the reptile fled and sought a lurking place. His very name describes him to the eye, a body starred with many-coloured spots. What lands, what oceans Ceres wandered then would weary to relate. The bounded world was narrow for the search. Again she passed through Sicily, again observed all signs, and as she wandered came to Chiane, who strove to tell where Proserpine had gone, but since her change had neither mouth nor tongue, and so was mute. And yet the nymph made plain by certain signs what she desired to say, for on the surface of the waves she showed a well-known girdle Proserpine had lost, by chance had dropped it in that sacred pool, which when the goddess recognized, at last, convinced her daughter had been forced from her, she tore her streaming locks, and frenzied struck her bosom with her palms. And in her rage, although she wist not where her daughter was, she blamed all countries, and cried out against their base ingratitude, and she declared the world unworthy of the gift of corn. But Sicily before all other lands, for there was found the token of her loss. For that she broke with savage hand the ploughs which there had turned the soil, and full of wrath levelled in equal death the peasant and his ox, both tillers of the soil, and made decree that land should prove deceptive to the seed, and rot all planted germs. That fertile isle, so noted through the world, becomes a waste. The corn is blighted in the early blade. Excessive heat, excessive rain destroys. The winds destroy, the constellations harm. The greedy birds devour the scattered seeds. Thistles and tares and tough weeds choke the wheat. For this the nymph Alphaeon raised her head above Ilian waves, and having first pushed back her dripping tresses from her brows back to her ears, she thus began to speak. O mother of the Virgin sought throughout the globe, O mother of nutritious fruits, let these tremendous labours have an end. Do not increase the violence of thy wrath against the earth, devoted to thy sway and not deserving blame, for only force compelled the earth to open for that wrong. Think not my supplication is to aid my native country. Hither am I come an alien. Pisa is my native land, and Elis gave me birth. Though I sojourn a stranger in this isle of Sicily, it yet delights me more than all the world. I, Arethusa, claim this isle my home, and do implore thee keep my throne secure, O greatest of the gods. A better hour, when thou art lightened of thy cares, will come, and when thy countenance again is kind.